The howl of the wind sounded like a wounded wolf as the storm clouds gathered, black and menacing, over the Arkansas wilderness. Delilah Turner knew she was going to die. The rope cutting into her wrists had long since numbed her hands, and the thunder rolling across the darkening sky promised a deluge that would likely be the end of her. It was 1879, and Benton, Arkansas, was supposed to have been a fresh start. Instead, she found herself bound to an old oak tree, miles from town, abandoned by the Holcomb gang after they'd taken everything she had, which wasn't much to begin with. "You'll freeze before anyone finds you," Silas Holcomb had sneered, his tobacco-stained teeth visible beneath his unkempt mustache. "Consider it payment for your brother's debts." The first drops of rain felt like ice against her skin. Delilah's calico dress offered little protection against the elements, and the thin shawl she'd been wearing was now nothing more than a sodden rag clinging to her shoulders. She hadn't eaten since morning, and the combination of hunger, fear, and cold was making her light-headed. "Help!" She tried to shout, but her voice was lost in the growing tempest. "Please, someone help me." Night was falling fast, and with it, her hope. The outlaws had chosen this spot well far enough from the main trail that no traveler would stumble upon her by accident. Her brother Daniel was likely still unconscious in the boarding house room they shared, unaware that his gambling debts had cost his sister her freedom, and perhaps her life. The rain came in earnest then, a cold sheet that plastered her honey-brown hair to her face and neck. Lightning split the sky, momentarily illuminating the dense forest around her. In that flash, she thought she saw movement, a deer perhaps, or her imagination conjuring rescue that wouldn't come. Another hour passed, or maybe it was minutes. Time had lost all meaning as the cold seeped into her bones. Her teeth had long since stopped chattering. A numbness was creeping through her limbs that frightened her more than the storm itself. She knew enough about surviving harsh winters to recognize that this was dangerous. The blue tinge to her fingertips told a story her mind wasn't ready to accept. When she heard the sound of hooves, Delilah was certain she was hallucinating. But then came a voice, deep and real, cutting through the storm's rage. "Hello? Is someone out here?" She tried to call out, but her voice was a mere whisper now. Still, something, perhaps the movement of her body against the tree, caught the rider's attention. "Good Lord," the man muttered as he dismounted, his spurs jingling as his boots hit the muddy ground. In the next flash of lightning, she saw him clearly, tall and broad-shouldered in a rain-slicked duster, a cowboy hat pulled low over his face. "Miss, can you hear me?" His hands were warm against her frozen cheeks as he tilted her face up. "Stay with me now." She tried to nod but wasn't sure if her body responded. The man worked quickly, drawing a knife from his belt and slicing through the ropes that bound her. Without their support, Delilah collapsed forward, unable to stand on her own. "I've got you," he said, catching her against his chest. Even through the layers of wet clothing, she could feel the solid warmth of him. "You're safe now." He lifted her effortlessly, carrying her to his horse, a large palomino that stood patiently in the rain. With impressive strength, he mounted while still holding her, positioning her in front of him in the saddle. "My name's August Mitchell," he said close to her ear as he wrapped his duster around her shaking form. "I'm taking you to my cabin. It's closer than town. Just hold on." Delilah wanted to thank him, to ask questions, to explain, but the world was spinning too fast now. The last thing she remembered was the steady beat of the horse's hooves and the solid feel of the stranger's arm around her waist, holding her secure as consciousness slipped away. When she awoke, it was to warmth and the crackling sound of a fire. Delilah blinked, disoriented as she took in unfamiliar surroundings. She was lying in a bed, wrapped in thick quilts. Her clothes had been replaced by an oversized flannel shirt that hung to her knees. Panic fluttered in her chest until she saw a woman seated by the hearth, knitting by the firelight. "Easy now," the older woman said, setting aside her work and approaching the bed. "You've had quite an ordeal, Miss Turner." "How do you know my name?" Delilah's voice was a rasp. "Found a letter in your pocket. I'm Martha Simmons, the midwife hereabouts. August brought you to his place and sent for me right away, proper as can be," she added with a knowing nod. "That boy might be a loner, but he was raised right." Memory came flooding back: the outlaws, the tree, the storm, the cowboy who'd found her. "Mr. Mitchell, is he here?" "Just stepped out to check the horses. Been worried sick about you these 3 days. 3 days." Delilah struggled to sit up, wincing at the pain in her wrists where the rope had cut deep. "You had a fierce fever. Almost lost you the first night." Martha's weathered face was serious. "August didn't leave your side till I convinced him you were turning the corner." The door opened then, bringing a gust of cold air and the man himself. August Mitchell was younger than Delilah had imagined in her delirium, perhaps 30 or so, with dark blonde hair and a face that spoke of days spent under the open sky. His eyes, a startling blue that reminded her of summer skies, widened when he saw she was awake. "Miss Turner," he said, removing his hat, "it's good to see you conscious." There was something both gentle and powerful about him that made Delilah acutely aware of her disheveled state. She pulled the quilt higher, suddenly shy. "I don't know how to thank you, Mr. Mitchell. You saved my life. Anyone would have done the same." He hung his hat on a peg by the door. "The question is, what were you doing tied to that tree? Sheriff Blackwell in Benton should hear about this." Delilah's face fell. "I can't go to the sheriff. It's complicated." August and Martha exchanged a look. "Well," Martha said, "that can wait until you're stronger. For now you need food and rest. August makes a decent stew, and I've brought fresh bread from town." As Martha busied herself at the stove, August pulled a chair near the bed. "Your brother's been looking for you," he said quietly. "Word reached town yesterday. Man's half mad with worry. Daniel's alive." Relief washed over her. "The Holcomb gang, they hit him pretty hard, I thought." She trailed off, unwilling to voice the fear that had haunted her. "He's alive and offering a reward for information. I sent word that you're safe, but haven't told him where yet. Thought you might have your reasons." Delilah nodded gratefully. "Thank you. It's not that I don't want to see him, but—" She twisted the edge of the quilt between her fingers. "It's his gambling that got us into this mess. He owes money to Silas Holcomb." August's jaw tightened. "The Holcombs did this to you. They came for Daniel, but he couldn't pay. I tried to intervene and—" She swallowed hard, remembering Silas's cruel laugh as his men had dragged her away. "They thought taking me would motivate my brother to find the money." "Bastards," August muttered, then glanced at Martha apologetically. The older woman merely nodded in agreement. "How did you find me?" Delilah asked, changing the subject. "No one should have been on that trail in such weather." A shadow passed over August's face. "I wasn't on the trail. I was tracking someone. Heard you call out just as I was about to give up and head home." There was more to that story, Delilah sensed, but she was too exhausted to press. Martha brought a bowl of steaming stew, and the rich aroma reminded Delilah how long it had been since she'd eaten properly. The first spoonful nearly made her weep with gratitude. "Easy," Martha cautioned. "Small bites. Your stomach needs to remember how to work." As Delilah ate, she studied her surroundings more carefully. August Mitchell's cabin was simple but comfortable: one large room with the bed tucked in a corner, a sturdy table with chairs, the hearth, and a few shelves lined with books. A rifle hung over the door, and through the window she could see a small barn and corral. "This is your home?" she asked. August nodded. It's not much, but it suits me. I run cattle on the north side of the property. Small operation, just me and occasionally a hired hand during calving season. It's lovely, she said sincerely. After 2 years of boarding houses and shared rooms with Daniel as they moved from town to town, the cabin seemed like a palace. You're welcome to stay until you're fully recovered, he offered. Martha can bring some proper clothes from town tomorrow. I couldn't impose nonsense, Martha interrupted. August has the space, and you're in no condition to travel. Besides, if the Holcombs are looking for you, this is the safest place for now. Nobody comes out this way unless invited. Delilah wanted to protest further but found she lacked the energy. The stew, the warmth, and the lingering effects of her ordeal combined to make her eyelids heavy. Rest now, August said, taking the empty bowl. We'll talk more tomorrow. As she drifted back to sleep, Delilah heard Martha and August speaking in low tones by the fire. Their voices, one weathered by age and the other deep with concern, were the most comforting sounds she'd heard in a very long time. When morning came, Delilah woke to sunlight streaming through the cabin windows and the smell of coffee brewing. August was nowhere to be seen, but a fresh dress and undergarments were folded on a chair beside the bed, along with a note in a careful hand. Martha brought these at first light. Breakfast is on the stove. I'm in the barn if you need anything. A.M. Moving gingerly, Delilah found she was stronger than expected. The dress, a simple blue calico, fit well enough, though it was a bit loose around the waist. Martha had included a hairbrush and pins, allowing Delilah to tame her tangled locks into a simple braid. The coffee was hot and strong, and beside it was a plate of biscuits and preserves. As she ate, Delilah considered her situation. She needed to let Daniel know she was safe, but returning to Benton meant risking another encounter with the Holcombs. How much money did her brother owe them? Enough to kidnap and nearly kill a woman over, apparently. The cabin door opened, and August stepped inside, removing his hat. He stopped short when he saw her up and dressed. "Miss Turner," he said with a nod, "you're looking better today. Thanks to you and Martha. Please call me Delilah." A small smile touched his lips. "Delilah, then, and I'm August to most folks around here." There was an awkward moment as they regarded each other. In the clear light of day, Delilah could see that August Mitchell was a handsome man, with laugh lines around his eyes despite the serious set of his mouth. His hands, she noticed, were strong but gentle as he poured himself coffee. "I should return to town today," she said, breaking the silence. "My brother must be worried sick." August's expression darkened. "The Holcombs are still in Benton from what Martha tells me. Going back now might not be wise. I can't hide forever." "No," he agreed, "but you can wait until you're fully recovered. Sheriff Blackwell might be persuaded to intervene if we explain what happened." Delilah shook her head. "Sheriff Blackwell and Silas Holcomb play cards every Wednesday. They're friendly, if not friends. Besides, it would be my word against theirs. Who would believe me?" "I would," August said simply. Something in his direct gaze made Delilah's cheeks warm. "Why? You don't know me." "I know what I saw, a woman left to die in a storm, and I know the Holcombs' reputation. They've been terrorizing these parts for years, but they're careful to keep just on the right side of the law." He sipped his coffee, thoughtful. "There was a time when they wouldn't have dared pull such a stunt, but things have changed since the war." Delilah sensed a history there, but didn't pry. Everyone who had lived through the conflict had stories they preferred not to tell. Her own father had never returned from Shiloh, and her mother had wasted away from grief and consumption 2 years later, leaving Delilah and Daniel to fend for themselves. "What will you do?" August asked. "Find Daniel, make sure he's all right, then," she sighed, "start over somewhere else, I suppose. We've done it before. Running isn't always the answer. It is when staying means facing men like Sela's Holcomb. She pushed her plate away, appetite gone. Daniel means well, but trouble follows him. Always has. August nodded, understanding in his eyes. Martha will be back this afternoon. Perhaps she can take a message to your brother, arrange a meeting somewhere safe. Relief flooded Delilah. You do that, seems the least I can do. He stood, refilling his cup. Meanwhile, you should rest. There are books on the shelf if you get bored. I need to check the herd, but I won't go far. After he left, Delilah explored the cabin more thoroughly. The books on August's shelf revealed an educated mind histories, a few novels, medical texts, and surprisingly, several volumes of poetry. She ran her finger along the spine of Wordsworth's collected works, remembering her mother reading those same verses aloud during happier times. The cabin told other stories as well. A small photograph in a silver frame showed a younger August in uniform, standing beside an older man with the same strong jaw and blue eyes. A father, perhaps, or an uncle. A carved wooden box on the mantel contained military medals and a folded Confederate flag. So he had fought for the South, then. Outside the window, she could see August moving around the corral, working with a young horse. His movements were patient and sure, his focus complete. Delilah found herself watching longer than she intended, drawn to the quiet competence he displayed. Martha arrived after midday, bringing supplies and news from town. "Daniel Turner's still searching for you," she reported as she hung her shawl by the door. "Staying at the Riverview Hotel now, not that boarding house. Says he won't leave until he finds his sister. The Holcombs, still around. Sela's was in the saloon last night, drinking and bragging as usual." Martha's disapproval was evident in the set of her mouth. "That man's needed a comeuppance for 20 years. Did you speak to my brother?" "Not directly. Didn't want to draw attention, but I can get word to him, tell him to meet you." Delilah considered her options. "There's an old hunting cabin near Beaver Creek where we used to fish. Daniel would remember it. Can you tell him to meet me there tomorrow at noon?" Martha nodded. "August will take you. It's not safe for a woman alone, especially with the Holcombs looking for you." "I've imposed on Mr. Mitchell enough." "Nonsense," Martha interrupted. "That man's been alone too long. Having someone to look after has done him good." She began unpacking her basket, laying out fresh bread and cheese. "Besides, August Mitchell isn't a man to leave a job half-finished. He found you, he'll see you safe." As if summoned by his name, August entered, bringing the crisp scent of outdoors with him. His eyes went to Delilah first, a quick assessment that seemed to satisfy him before he greeted Martha. "Any news?" he asked, washing his hands in the basin by the door. Martha relayed Delilah's plan. August listened without comment, but she could see the wheels turning behind those thoughtful blue eyes. "Beaver Creek's a good choice," he finally said. "Secluded but not too far. We'll leave at first light, be there well before your brother." "You don't have to escort me," Delilah protested. "Just point me in the right direction." August's expression was unyielding. "The Holcombs are still looking for you. I'm not sending you into the woods alone." There was something in his tone that brooked no argument. Delilah realized this was perhaps a glimpse of the soldier he had once been, a man accustomed to command and to being obeyed. She found herself nodding in acceptance. "Thank you," she said quietly. The rest of the day passed in quiet domesticity. Martha stayed for supper, bringing news of the outside world and gentle humor to the meal. Watching August laugh at the midwife's stories, Delilah saw a different side to the serious cowboy who had rescued her, a man capable of warmth and genuine connection. As the sun set, Martha prepared to leave. "I'll get your message to Daniel," she promised Delilah. "And I'll be discreet." After she'd gone, an awkward silence fell between August and Delilah. They were, after all, strangers thrown together by circumstance, a woman in distress and the man who had saved her. The intimacy of sharing a small cabin suddenly seemed pronounced in Martha's absence. "I'll sleep in the barn tonight," August said, reading her discomfort. "You take the bed." "I couldn't put you out of your own home. It's no hardship," he assured her. "I've slept worse places." A shadow crossed his face and Delilah knew he was remembering the war. "Were you at Shiloh?" she asked suddenly, surprise registered in his eyes. "No, Antietam, Gettysburg, the Wilderness, but not Shiloh. Why?" "My father died there." Union sighed. August absorbed this information silently. "Then, I'm sorry for your loss." Simple words, but genuine. Delilah nodded her acknowledgement. "It was a long time ago, not so long." He moved to the hearth, adding another log to the fire. "The war changes a man, changes how he sees the world. Is that why you live out here?" "Away from everyone." A wry smile touched his lips. "Partly. After everything I saw, everything I did, quiet seemed the better choice." Delilah understood that sentiment all too well. After their mother's death, she and Daniel had moved constantly, never settling long enough to form attachments. It was safer that way, or so she'd told herself. "What will you do after you meet your brother?" August asked, changing the subject. Delilah sighed. "I don't know. Daniel always has a plan, another town, another opportunity. I just follow." "And what would you do if the choice was yours alone?" The question caught her off guard. What would she choose if not bound by loyalty to her brother? "I'd find a place to stay," she said slowly. "Somewhere I could teach, perhaps. I had some schooling before my mother died." August nodded as though her answer confirmed something he'd suspected. "Benton has a schoolhouse. No teacher since Miss Abernathy married and moved to Little Rock last fall." "Are you suggesting I apply?" Delilah laughed softly. "With the Holcombs waiting to collect on my brother's debts, I'm suggesting there are options besides running." His blue eyes held hers steadily. "If that's what you want." The moment stretched between them, charged with something Delilah wasn't ready to name. She looked away first. "It's getting late," she said. "We should both rest if we're leaving at dawn." August nodded, gathering what he needed for the night. At the door, he paused. "Delilah," he said, the first time he'd used her name without prompting. "Whatever happens tomorrow, know that you have a friend here, if you need one." Then he was gone, leaving Delilah to ponder the unexpected offer and the man who had made it. Morning came early, with a thin mist hanging over the hills surrounding August's property. Delilah dressed quickly in the clothes Martha had provided, grateful for the sturdy boots and warm shawl included in the bundle. Her own things had been ruined by the storm. August was already preparing the horses when she stepped outside, a small pack of provisions secured to his saddle. He'd brought out a gentler mare for Delilah, with a side saddle that looked rarely used. "It was my mother's," he explained when he caught her looking. "Haven't had cause to use it in years, but it should serve." The ride to Beaver Creek would take several hours, following trails that wound through the hills rather than the main roads where they might be seen. As they set out, the rising sun burned away the mist, revealing a landscape of rolling forests and occasional clearings. Delilah was a competent rider, having grown up on a small farm before the war. August seemed pleased by this, setting a pace that was comfortable but steady. They spoke little at first, each lost in their own thoughts as the horses picked their way along the narrow paths. "How did you end up in Benton?" August finally asked as they paused to water the horses at a small stream. Delilah watched a dragonfly skim across the water's surface before answering. "Daniel heard there was work at the lumber mill. And gambling at the saloons, though that part wasn't mentioned in his letter." Your brother has a problem. It wasn't a question, but Delilah nodded anyway. Since the war, he was too young to fight but old enough to see what it did to our community. When Mother died, something in him changed. Like he decided life was too uncertain to waste on caution. August considered this as he refilled their canteens. And you, what did you decide? That someone had to be cautious, she said with a rueful smile. Someone had to make sure we had a roof and food, so that became my role. That's a heavy burden for a sister. We manage. But even to her own ears, the words lacked conviction. How many times had they fled in the night, one step ahead of Daniel's creditors? How many jobs and potential friendships had she abandoned because of her brother's reckless choices? August seemed to read her thoughts. There comes a point when helping someone means they never learn to help themselves. Delilah stiffened. He's my brother, my only family. I'm not suggesting you abandon him, August said gently. Just that there might be a way to love him without letting his choices dictate your life. The words hit closer to home than Delilah cared to admit. She remounted without responding, urging her horse forward. August followed without pressing the issue further. As they continued their journey, the terrain grew more rugged. August led them on a winding path that sometimes seemed to disappear entirely among the trees, yet he never hesitated. Occasionally, he would point out landmarks or wildlife, a hawk circling overhead, the tracks of a deer family, wildflowers blooming in a sunny patch. You know these woods well, Delilah observed. August nodded. Used to hunt here with my father before the war. Afterward, when crowds and noise became too much, I'd ride out here, find my peace again. There was a vulnerability in that admission that touched Delilah. She realized that August Mitchell was a man of depths, not immediately apparent, a soldier who sought peace, a loner who offered friendship, a serious man with poetry on his bookshelf. Did it work? She asked. Finding your peace. A small smile crossed his face. Most days. Some nights are harder than others. Delilah understood. She had her own sleepless nights haunted by memories and worries. Does it ever go away completely? The feeling that everything could fall apart again? August considered the question seriously. Not entirely, but it fades. You build something new, something worth protecting. That gives you a reason to keep the darkness at bay. Is that why you have your ranch? Something worth protecting? Partly, he acknowledged. It was my father's dream originally. When he didn't come home from the war, it became mine by default. Now. He gazed across the rolling hills. Now it's home, my place in the world. Delilah envied him that certainty, that sense of belonging. She couldn't remember the last time she'd felt truly at home anywhere. They reached Beaver Creek by mid-morning, the hunting cabin nestled in a small clearing beside the burbling water. It was a simple structure, little more than a single room with a stone fireplace, but it appeared sound enough, despite years of neglect. We used to come here summers when I was young, Delilah said, dismounting carefully. Father would fish while Mother read to us on the bank. It was before. She didn't need to finish the sentence. August nodded in understanding. It's a good spot, defensible with clear lines of sight. The soldier in him assessing tactical positions. Even now, they tied the horses where they could graze and set about making the cabin habitable. August cleared debris from the chimney while Delilah swept years of leaves and dust from the interior. There was an old table with a bench, a platform bed frame without a mattress, and a few shelves holding dusty jars and forgotten tools. Daniel and I were here last when I was 15, Delilah said as she found a chipped mug she recognized. Right before he started working at the factory in Memphis. Good memories? August asked, building a small fire to take the chill from the air. Some of the best, she smiled, remembering. Daniel taught me to fish right there. She pointed to a bend in the creek visible through the doorway. He was so patient then, showing me how to tie the flies, how to cast without tangling the line. August watched her, his expression softening at her reminiscence. He sounds like a good brother. He is, she corrected herself. He's just lost his way somewhat. People can find their way back, August said quietly, with the right reason. Something in his tone made Delilah look at him more closely. August Mitchell was speaking from experience, she realized, what had brought him back from whatever darkness the war had led him into. Before she could ask, a twig snapped outside. August was on his feet instantly, hand going to the pistol at his hip. "Stay inside," he murmured, moving toward the door with a fluid grace that spoke of combat training. Heart pounding, Delilah pressed against the wall beside the window, peering cautiously through the grimy glass. Relief flooded her when she recognized the figure approaching from the trees. "It's Daniel," she called to August, already moving toward the door. Her brother looked thinner than when she'd last seen him, with dark circles under his eyes and a healing cut above his right eyebrow, evidence of the Holcomb's visit. But his face lit up when he saw her, and he quickened his pace. "Delilah," he called, using his childhood nickname for her. "Thank God you're safe." They met in the clearing, Daniel sweeping her into a tight embrace that lifted her off her feet. "I thought I'd lost you," he whispered against her hair, "when the Holcombs came to collect and took you instead. I've been out of my mind." "I'm all right," she assured him, pulling back to examine his face. "They roughed you up." Daniel touched the cut self-consciously. "It's nothing. But how did you escape? Martha Simmons said you'd been found, but she wouldn't tell me where you were staying." Delilah turned to August, who stood a respectful distance away, watching their reunion with guarded eyes. "Daniel, this is August Mitchell. He saved my life." Her brother approached August with an outstretched hand. "I don't know how to thank you, sir." August accepted the handshake with a nod. "No thanks needed. Anyone would have done the same." Daniel's expression turned grim. "Not anyone. Those bastards left my sister to die over a gambling debt. My debt." Shame colored his voice. "I owe you more than I can ever repay." "You owe me nothing," August said firmly. "But you might consider what you owe your sister." Daniel flinched as though struck. Delilah intervened quickly. "Let's go inside. We need to decide what to do now." The small cabin felt crowded with the three of them, Daniel pacing while August leaned against the wall near the door, his posture relaxed but alert. Delilah sat on the bench, watching her brother with growing concern. "We need to leave Benton," Daniel said definitively. "I've heard Helena's booming now with the steamboat trade." "We could—" "No," Delilah interrupted, surprising herself with the firmness of her tone. "I'm tired of running, Daniel." Her brother stopped pacing to stare at her. "Delilah, the Holcombs aren't going to forget about this. Silas has been asking all over town about you." "How much do you owe them?" August asked, his voice level. Daniel hesitated, then sighed. $200. Delilah gasped. It was an enormous sum, more than she earned in 6 months at the dressmaker's shop where she'd been working in Benton. "And how do you propose to pay that in Helena?" August pressed. "Or will you just accumulate new debts there?" Daniel's face flushed with anger. "This isn't your concern, Mitchell." "It became my concern when I found your sister half dead in a storm," August replied evenly. "And it remains my concern until I know she's safe." The two men regarded each other tensely. Delilah stood, placing herself between them. "This isn't helping. Daniel, Mr. Mitchell is right. Running won't solve this. The Holcombs will just find someone else to terrorize, and we'll be starting over again with nothing." "What choice do we have?" Daniel asked, his anger deflating into desperation. "I don't have $200. "I do," August said quietly. Both Turner siblings turned to stare at him in shock. "You'd pay my debt," Daniel asked incredulously. Not exactly. August straightened from the wall, his expression serious. I'm offering Delilah a loan if she wants it. She can decide how to use it. Delilah felt the weight of the moment pressing on her. August was offering her a choice: pay Daniel's debt and free them both from the Holcombs, or use the money to start over on her own terms. Why would you do this? She asked softly. August's blue eyes held hers steadily. Because everyone deserves a chance to choose their own path, and because I think you've been following someone else's for too long. Daniel looked between them, understanding dawning on his face. You care for my sister. It wasn't a question, but August answered anyway. I respect her. And I'd like to see what she might become if given the opportunity to decide for herself. The simple honesty of his words struck Delilah deeply. When was the last time anyone had asked what she wanted? When had anyone seen her as more than Daniel Turner's responsible sister? Daniel, she said, turning to her brother, I love you, but August is right. This can't continue. If I pay this debt for you, there can't be another. Her brother's face showed a mix of emotions: shame, relief, and a dawning realization of how much his choices had cost her. I know, he said finally. I've been selfish, Delilah, letting you clean up my messes while I chase the next big win. He ran a hand through his dark hair, so like her own. What if I went to California? My friend James wrote that there's honest work in the mines there. Good pay if you're willing to work hard. Delilah studied her brother's face, looking for the sincerity she desperately wanted to find. Is that what you want? I want to stop being the millstone around your neck, he said with unexpected rawness. I want to be the brother you deserve. She felt tears prick her eyes. You've never been a millstone, Daniel, just lost. August cleared his throat gently. The afternoon stage to Little Rock passes about 5 miles east of here. From there, you could connect to the westbound train. He addressed Daniel directly. If that's truly what you want. Daniel nodded slowly. It is, but what about the Holcombs? They'll come after Delilah again if I disappear. Let me worry about the Holcombs, August said, and something in his tone suggested he had experience dealing with men like Silas. Delilah looked between the two men, her beloved, troubled brother and the quiet cowboy who had saved her in more ways than one. A decision was forming in her mind, one that both terrified and exhilarated her. Here's what we'll do, she said firmly. August, I'll accept your loan, but only half. Enough to pay Daniel's debt and get him to California. She turned to her brother. You'll write to me once you're settled, let me know you're safe, and you'll start fresh, truly fresh. Daniel nodded, gratitude and a new resolve in his eyes. I promise, Delilah, no more gambling, no more debts. And I'll stay in Benton, she continued. Apply for the teaching position at the schoolhouse. August's surprise was evident. You'd stay, even with everything that's happened. I'm tired of running, she said simply. It's time I made my own home on my own terms. There was respect in August's gaze and something more that made her heart beat faster. It won't be easy confronting the Holcombs. I'll have help, she said, holding his gaze, if you're offering. I am, he replied without hesitation. Daniel looked between them with a knowing expression. I think my sister's in good hands. He clasped August's shoulder. Thank you for saving her when I couldn't. The three of them spent the remainder of the day planning. August rode to the nearest farm to borrow a wagon that would take Daniel to meet the stage. Delilah wrote a letter for her brother to carry to the school board in Benton, formally applying for the teaching position. And Daniel, in a gesture that brought tears to Delilah's eyes, gave her the gold pocket watch that had been their father's, the one thing of value he'd never pawned or gambled away. Keep it safe for me, he said as he pressed it into her palm, until I've earned the right to carry it again. As the sun began its descent, August hitched the borrowed wagon, The time had come for farewells. "I'll write as soon as I reach Sacramento," Daniel promised as he embraced his sister. "And I'll send money when I can to repay the debt." "Just take care of yourself," Delilah said, fighting back tears. "That's all I want." Daniel turned to August, offering his hand. "My sister is the best person I know. Treat her accordingly." August's handshake was firm. "You have my word." They watched the wagon disappear down the trail, Daniel's final wave a silhouette against the setting sun. Delilah felt a curious mixture of loss and liberation. For the first time in years, she was making choices based on what she wanted, not what circumstances demanded. "Are you all right?" August asked quietly beside her. She nodded, wiping away a stray tear. "It's the right thing for both of us. And Benton, you're sure that's what you want?" Delilah turned to face him fully. "I want to stop running. I want to build something that's mine." She paused, gathering her courage. "And I'd like the chance to know you better, August Mitchell." His smile then was like sunrise breaking through clouds. "I'd like that very much, Delilah Turner." They rode back to August's ranch as twilight settled over the hills, the horses picking their way carefully along the darkening trails. The cabin windows glowed with welcoming light as they approached, Martha having prepared it for their return. "Home safe," August said as he helped Delilah dismount. His hands lingered at her waist a moment longer than necessary, and neither of them was inclined to step away. "Thank you," she said softly. "Not just for today, but for everything. For finding me in that storm, for giving me choices." "You always had choices," he replied. "You just needed to believe you deserved to make them." In the fading light, with the sounds of night creatures beginning their symphony around them, Delilah felt a new chapter of her life beginning. Whatever came next, confronting the Holcombs, building a life in Benton, discovering what might grow between her and this quiet, honorable man, she would face it on her own terms. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, that thought filled her with hope rather than dread. The next week brought significant changes to Delilah's life. With August's support, she approached the school board in Benton, her credentials from before her mother's death sufficiently impressive to secure her the teaching position. The small house behind the schoolhouse would be hers once the term started in 3 weeks' time. The matter of the Holcombs proved more complicated. August insisted on accompanying Delilah to Sheriff Blackwell's office, where they reported both her kidnapping and Daniel's departure for California. "So the boy skipped town without paying his debts," Blackwell said, leaning back in his chair with a skeptical expression. "And you expect me to believe Silas Holcomb, a businessman in good standing, kidnapped you over it?" "I was tied to a tree during a storm, Sheriff," Delilah said firmly. "I nearly died. And you have witnesses to this kidnapping." "Just my word," she admitted. "And the rope burns on my wrists." Blackwell's gaze flicked to August. "What's your interest in this, Mitchell? Far as I recall, you keep to yourself out on that ranch of yours." "I found Miss Turner," August replied evenly. "And I don't take kindly to men who would leave a woman to die, regardless of what her brother might owe." The sheriff studied them both, his weathered face revealing nothing. Finally, he sighed. "I can't arrest Silas on your word alone, Miss Turner. But I can have a conversation with him, make it clear that further harassment won't be tolerated." It wasn't justice, but it was something. As they left the sheriff's office, Delilah's shoulders sagged with the weight of the confrontation. "He won't do anything," she said quietly. "He and Silas are too friendly." August nodded grimly. "Which is why we'll handle this another way." That evening, while Delilah stayed safely at Martha Simmons's home in town, August paid a visit to the Broken Spoke Saloon, where Silas Holcomb held court most nights. What transpired in that smoky room, Delilah never knew the full details of. But when August returned to Martha's house late that night, his knuckles were raw and there was a satisfied set to his jaw. "The debt is settled," he said simply. And Silas has been reminded of the consequences of threatening women in this county. Martha, who had stayed up with Delilah, cackled with delight. About time someone stood up to that bully. His father was just the same all bluster until someone bigger came along. "He won't bother you again," August assured Delilah. "But if he does, or if anyone associated with him gives you trouble, you come to me immediately." The protective intensity in his voice sent a warmth through Delilah that had nothing to do with Martha's hearth fire. "Thank you," she said softly. August tipped his hat. "I should go. It's late and you both need your rest." "Nonsense," Martha declared. "It's pouring rain again and you're not riding all the way back to your ranch at this hour. The spare room is made up." As August reluctantly accepted the midwife's hospitality, Delilah caught his eye across the room. The connection between them was palpable, a shared understanding and growing affection that needed no words. The weeks that followed settled into a rhythm as Delilah prepared for the start of the school term. She moved into the small teacher's house, which Martha helped her make habitable with donated furniture and homemade curtains. The women of Benton, learning of her ordeal and impressed by her determination to stay despite it, rallied around her with practical support and friendship. August rode into town regularly, ostensibly to sell cattle or purchase supplies, but his visits always included time spent with Delilah. They walked along the river, he helped repair the sagging porch of her new home, and they talked about books, about their pasts, about their hopes for the future. "You ever regret it?" he asked one evening as they sat on her newly mended porch, watching fireflies rise from the grass. "Staying in Benton," Delilah considered the question seriously. "Sometimes I wonder if I've made things harder for myself. People still whisper about what happened with the Holcombs, and some parents might hesitate to send their children to a teacher with such a history. And yet you stayed." "I stayed because running was never the answer, and because—" She hesitated, then met his gaze directly. "Because there were reasons to stay that outweighed the reasons to leave." August reached for her hand, his touch gentle but sure. "I'm glad you stayed, Delilah Turner." "So am I." August Mitchell. The first letter from Daniel arrived just as the school term was beginning. He had reached California safely and found work at a mine near Sacramento. The pay was good, the work hard but honest, and he'd made friends who didn't gamble or drink to excess. "He sounds happy," Delilah told August as they rode back from his ranch one Sunday afternoon. She had taken to spending her day of rest there, enjoying the peace of the countryside and August's company. "He sounds like a man finding his way," August agreed, "which is what you hoped for him." The school term brought its own challenges and joys. Delilah found she had a talent for teaching, her patience and genuine interest in her students winning over even the most reluctant learners. By October, even those parents who had initially been skeptical of the young woman with the scandalous past were grudgingly admitting that Miss Turner was the best teacher Benton had seen in years. As autumn painted the Arkansas hills in brilliant colors, August and Delilah's courtship progressed with a steady certainty. He began calling on her formally on Saturday evenings, much to the delight of the town gossips. Martha, who had appointed herself Delilah's unofficial guardian, approved heartily. "That man has been waiting for someone to bring light back into his life since he returned from the war," she told Delilah as they prepared Sunday dinner at August's ranch. "And you, my dear, are certainly full of light." Delilah blushed at the midwife's candor. "He's been through so much, Martha. Sometimes I wonder if I can ever truly understand what the war was like for him." "You don't need to understand every shadow in a man's heart to love him," Martha said wisely. You just need to accept that those shadows exist and be willing to stand beside him when they darken his days. On a crisp November afternoon, August took Delilah riding to a high meadow overlooking his property. The valley below was a patchwork of autumn colors, his ranch buildings small but neat in the distance. My father bought this land before I was born, August said as they dismounted. He had a vision of what it could become, a place where a family could thrive for generations. Delilah heard the emotion in his voice. He would be proud of what you've accomplished here. I hope so. August helped her spread a blanket on the grass. I've been thinking about the future a lot lately, about what I want this place to become. There was something in his tone that made Delilah's heart quicken. And what do you want it to become? August took her hands in his. A home, Delilah, not just for me, but for a family. Our family, if you would do me the honor of becoming my wife. Though she had begun to hope for this moment, the reality of it still took her breath away. August, I know it hasn't been long, he continued earnestly, and I know we've both had our share of hardships. But from the moment I found you in that storm, something changed in me. You brought light back into my world, Delilah Turner. Tears filled her eyes, but they were tears of joy. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I will marry you, August Mitchell. His smile was radiant as he pulled a small box from his pocket. Inside was a delicate ring with a single pearl surrounded by tiny diamonds. It was my mother's, he explained as he slipped it onto her finger. My father gave it to her when they started their life here. It's beautiful, Delilah breathed. I'll treasure it always. August's kiss was gentle at first, then deepened with a passion that spoke of promises and dreams for their future together. When they finally broke apart, Delilah laughed with pure happiness. What will your students think of their teacher becoming Mrs. Mitchell? August asked, unable to stop smiling. They'll be delighted. Little Emma Harris already asked me last week if you were my beau. August laughed, the sound echoing across the meadow. Smart girl, and what did you tell her? That it wasn't proper for young ladies to discuss such matters, Delilah replied primly, then grinned. But she saw right through me. They were married on Christmas Eve in the small church in Benton, with Martha Simmons beaming in the front pew and the entire town in attendance. Delilah wore a gown of ivory silk that August had insisted on ordering from Little Rock, with her mother's lace veil and wildflowers in her dark hair. Sheriff Blackwell, who had gradually come to respect the young teacher who stood her ground despite the whispers, gave her away in Daniel's absence. And when August spoke his vows in a voice that carried to every corner of the church, there wasn't a dry eye in the congregation. I, August Mitchell, take thee, Delilah Turner, to be my lawfully wedded wife. I promise to cherish and protect you all the days of my life, to stand beside you in good times and in hardship, and to build with you a home filled with love and laughter. What began in a storm has become the greatest blessing of my life, and I will spend every day trying to be worthy of the trust you've placed in me. Delilah's own vows were simple but heartfelt. I, Delilah Turner, take thee, August Mitchell, to be my lawfully wedded husband. I promise to love you faithfully through all our seasons together, to be your partner and your friend, your comfort and your joy. You found me when I was lost and gave me the courage to choose my own path. That path has led me here to you, and I will walk it by your side for all our days to come. As they exchanged rings, a simple gold band joining the pearl ring on Delilah's finger, Martha dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. Never thought I'd see the day, she whispered to Mrs. Blackwell beside her. That boy smiled more in the last 6 months than in all the years since the war combined. The celebration afterward was held at the Benton Hotel, the dining room transformed with evergreen boughs and candles. The entire town turned out to wish the newlyweds well, even Silas Holcomb, who kept a respectful distance and tipped his hat to the bride with unexpected civility. "Seems you've won over even your enemies," August murmured as they shared their first dance as husband and wife. Delilah smiled up at him. "Or perhaps your conversation with him was more persuasive than you let on." August's laugh rumbled through his chest. "A gentleman never tells. But let's just say Silas and I reached an understanding about the proper treatment of ladies in Benton." As the evening progressed, Martha approached with a telegram that had just arrived. "For you, Mrs. Mitchell," she said with a wink, still delighting in Delilah's new name. The message was from Daniel, sending his congratulations and love from California, along with news that he'd been promoted to foreman at the mine. "Wish I could be there," he wrote, "but know that I am raising a glass to you both from afar. August, take care of her. Delilah, be happy. You deserve it more than anyone I know." Delilah pressed the telegram to her heart, overwhelmed with gratitude for how far they had all come since that stormy night. "Are you ready to go home, Mrs. Mitchell?" August asked softly as the celebration began to wind down. Home. Such a simple word, yet it had eluded Delilah for so long. Now it meant August's ranch, their ranch, and the life they would build there together. "Yes," she said, taking his hand. "Take me home." The years that followed brought both joys and challenges to the Mitchell ranch. Delilah continued teaching until the birth of their first child, a son they named James Daniel Mitchell, after both their fathers in the winter of 1881. August expanded the ranch operations, adding more cattle and improving the farmhouse with Delilah's comfort in mind. Daniel visited from California when little James was born, a changed man from the reckless brother Delilah had known. Steady work and responsibility had matured him, and he proudly presented August with the full $200 he had borrowed, plus interest. "Keep it for the boy," August insisted, but Daniel was adamant. "I need to settle this debt," he said firmly, "for my own peace of mind. Besides," he added with a grin, "I'm doing well enough now, might even buy my own claim next year." As they stood on the porch watching Daniel's wagon disappear down the lane, Delilah leaned against her husband's solid warmth. "Did you ever imagine, that night in the storm, that this is where we'd end up?" she asked. August's arm tightened around her waist. "I knew from the moment you opened your eyes in my cabin that you were going to change my life. I just didn't know how completely." In the spring of 1883, their daughter Elizabeth Martha Mitchell arrived, a tiny bundle with her father's blue eyes and her mother's determination. August built a cradle with his own hands, carving wildflowers along its edges, a reminder of the meadow where he had proposed. The ranch prospered under their care, becoming known throughout the county for its fine cattle and the hospitality of its owners. Delilah started a small school for the children of neighboring ranches too far from town, teaching in a converted room of their expanded home. Martha Simmons remained a frequent visitor and beloved friend until her peaceful passing in 1888, leaving a void in the community she had served for decades. In her memory, August and Delilah established a scholarship for young women seeking medical training, a fitting tribute to the midwife who had brought so many of Benton's children into the world. As their own children grew, Delilah often told them the story of how she and their father met, though the more frightening aspects were softened for young ears. "Mama was lost in a storm," she would say, "and Papa found her when she needed him most. Like a knight in a fairy tale." Little Elizabeth would ask, wide-eyed. "No," August would answer, catching his wife's gaze across the room. "Better than a fairy tale, because it was real." On the 10th anniversary of their wedding, August surprised Delilah with a trip back to the meadow where he had proposed. Though it was winter now, the view was no less spectacular, the valley below blanketed in pristine snow. 10 years, Delilah marveled as they stood wrapped in heavy coats, their breath forming clouds in the crisp air. "Sometimes it seems like yesterday that you found me tied to that tree." August took her hands in his, rubbing them to keep them warm. "And sometimes it feels like I've loved you for a lifetime. Do you ever wonder what might have happened if you hadn't been tracking that deer that night, if you hadn't heard my call?" August's expression grew serious. "I've never told you this, but I wasn't tracking a deer that night." Delilah looked up in surprise. "You weren't?" He shook his head. "I was tracking Selah's Holcomb. There had been reports of cattle rustling, and I had reason to believe he was involved. I followed his men from town but lost the trail in the storm. So if they hadn't taken me, I might never have found you," August finished, wonder in his voice. "It's strange how fate works sometimes. The very men who meant you harm led me right to you." Delilah shivered, but not from the cold. "God works in mysterious ways," my mother always said. "Indeed he does." August pulled her close. "And I thank him every day for bringing you into my life, Delilah Mitchell." As they rode home to where their children waited with Martha's daughter, who had come to stay with them, Delilah reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From a frightened young woman tied to a tree in a storm to a respected teacher, beloved wife, and mother, each step had led her exactly where she was meant to be. The ranch house glowed with lamplight as they approached, smoke curling from the chimney against the winter sky. Inside would be warmth and laughter, the sounds of their children, the life they had built together. "We're home," August said as they dismounted, his voice filled with contentment. Delilah smiled, taking his hand as they walked toward the welcoming light. "Yes, we are." And as they crossed the threshold together, she knew with absolute certainty that this man, these children, this life was what she had been searching for all along. Not a place to hide, but a place to belong. Not an escape, but a homecoming. What had begun in a desperate moment during a violent storm had transformed into something beautiful and enduring, a love that would weather whatever life might bring. As steadfast as the hills that surrounded their home, and as constant as the stars that had guided August to her on that fateful night so many years ago.